But then an angel of God comes to you, and the angel of God has a finger of fire, and he tells you, shh, and puts his finger on your mouth, so you don't tell anybody that you know everything.
Welcome to a new episode of Wellness Curated. This is your host, Anshu Bahanda. Welcome to the season Mystical Practices for Modern Minds. Today we're going to delve into Jewish mysticism, more specifically the Kabbalah, and how we can incorporate it to increase the well-being in our daily lives. I'm going to start with a little story. So there was a village which has a beautiful garden in the middle of the village. But over time, the garden dried out and started falling apart. It became desolate. The earth cracked. The stream dried up. And then one day, a little girl started looking after a little patch of garden. She took a watering can and started watering it. People asked her, "What's the point?" And she said, "Maybe I will inspire other people to do the same." And sure enough, more and more people from the village started looking after the garden. And before you knew it, the garden was more beautiful than ever. And they mended the earth was beautiful. And that is the essence of tikkun olam, which is a Hebrew phrase, which means that the earth was created a particular way and human beings are meant to mend it. That is the essence of the Kabbalah. To help us introduce the Kabbalah, we have two very special guests with us today. We have Dr. Shipper, who's a professor and neurologist, and he has a long-term interest in the interface of contemporary science and the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah. We also have Gahl Eden Sasson, who's an author and a teacher, and he brings together Kabbalah, astrology, and psychology in a very accessible and engaging way. Welcome to the chat, gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
So, Dr. Shipper, I'm going to start with you. Let's start with the basics. Can you explain to me what is the Kabbalah and how can it help us with our well-being?
The Kabbalah is basically Jewish mysticism. And it originates 3,300 years ago when our tradition says that Moses received the Torah on Mount Sinai. And the Torah had two major components. There was a revealed Torah, which then became elaborated on as the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is the Talmud. But there was also an esoteric aspect of the Torah, which is the Kabbalah. And the difference is that the revealed Torah was passed on by Moses to the elders and from them to basically the entire nation of Israel. The Kabbalah, on the other hand, was passed on to highly selective individuals and from some masters of the Kabbalah to their usually small numbers of disciples. And this chain has continued to this day unbroken, but largely under the radar of general Torah scholarship. There have been episodes, epochs when some of the Jewish mysticism spread and permeated into the mainstream, such as in the 2nd century with the writing of the Zohar, and then in the 16th century in the Israeli city of Sfat, there was an explosion of Kabbalistic knowledge by Isaac Luria and many of his followers. Now, it is anticipated that as we encroach upon what's called the 7th millennium, which is within the next 215 or so years, there's going to be a tremendous explosion of Kabbalistic knowledge throughout the world, commensurate with some tremendous scientific discoveries, which will complement the Kabbalah beautifully. And I'm already, I believe, seeing with the advent of quantum mechanics, relativity, Bohmian mechanics, I am seeing conflation, which I'm publishing on, between ancient Kabbalistic wisdom and the cutting edges of contemporary physics. So this is sort of like a background of what the Kabbalah is. It's based on certain profound principles. One of them is panentheism. Panentheism is the notion that God is both transcendent of his creation, but also immanent within the creation. It's both. Either view alone, that God is only transcendent or only immanent, which would be pantheism, are anathema to Orthodox Jewish thinking. Another important concept is that of panpsychism, which is gaining favor now in many secular circles because of the failure, for example, of materialism to explain consciousness. The Kabbalah is panpsychist in its ontology.
Thank you for explaining it so well. Gahl, I want to ask you, so you combine the Kabbalah with astrology and psychology, and you give us an example of how these different disciplines intersect. Tell me, how do you see it helping well-being?
I mean, I think that first of all, even the term Kabbalah, because in the tradition coming from the Bible, for example, in the Bible, there are, I think, 80 times when the author or the writer stops and explains the meaning of a name. I think the meaning of names are extremely important in the Bible, even though for people who read Hebrew, there's of course I know what it means, but it kind of puts you into much more focus on the character and what the main theme of that character is. So it helps you navigate the story. And the same thing with Kabbalah. Kabbalah basically means in Hebrew to accept, to receive. And you can't receive without accepting. I mean, I can give you a gift, but you don't receive it. So there was no Kabbalah. When I look at Kabbalah more as, because I don't come from a background of religion, I come more from my family is more in science and more in technology. So for me, I had to always adjust my imagination growing up with that logic, you know. So for me, the idea of Kabbalah really helped accept myself, accept flaws of other people, so I can receive the good thing that they have to offer. So I can even prepare myself to give to the world what I have to offer, because if you don't accept yourself, you can't give. So the whole idea of giving and receiving, it's so fascinating for me, because I see a lot of systems of mythology and systems of mysticism that take that oneness that we talked so much about here. You know, the panpsychism basically talks about it. It's a way to access oneness. It's to understand that the one is everywhere, that you are the same as everyone else, you know. You're part of this oneness. So the whole concept of accepting yourself, accepting what the one gave you in order to share it with other people, I think is what really the Kabbalah is all about. On the bottom level, it's really helping you accept yourself. And I think that if you look at the history of Kabbalah, because I came to Kabbalah after I studied psychology, after I studied history, I saw it's fascinating because when I look, because I love history, I look at when Kabbalah actually got a big boost, and you heard a few times already, it's usually a time that was really terrible for at least the Jewish nation. If you go back all the way to Maaseh HaMerkavah, to the working of the chariots, the origin maybe of Kabbalah, we suspect, is 586 BCE. And what happened around that time? Nebuchadnezzar comes to Jerusalem and destroys the temple. What? How could that be? 500 years we were told that this is where God lives. Nobody can come to God's place and take him out of there. Oops, unless God is really everywhere. And here we have Ezekiel sitting there in Tel Aviv, not Tel Aviv that we know, but in Babylon by the river zone. We sat and cried, you know, Bonnie M song, if you remember. So he sat there. He basically, I really recommend, first of all, I recommend reading the Bible. It's amazing. But Ezekiel 1 is a fascinating chapter. You see God himself supposedly coming to Ezekiel. Ezekiel doesn't have to go to Jerusalem. The only thing he needs to do is close his eyes and meditate. So the idea of mysticism is, okay, you had a physical place where you attributed God to. Now it's gone. Don't get caught in the cognitive dissonance. Overcome that. That's precisely what we were talking about until now. There is paradoxes. Some of these paradoxes are cognitive dissonance that you have to overcome. And Kabbalah, what Kabbalah does, at least for me, and I assume for everybody else, is bring us back to oneness, because
Mm-hmm.
living in this planet is a lot of time yes, no. Are you coming? Are you not coming? To be or not to be? Everything
Mm-hmm.
is kind of divided into two: masculine, feminine. Oh, it's unmasculine, not feminine. Right, left, Western, Eastern. Come on. Everything is split into two. But I understand, because a lot of different systems break it into two. So what Kabbalah does, it brings us back to the Tao. How? By telling us that we have to strive to look into the oneness, and the oneness you can come inside of you. Even when another time that the Kabbalah got a big kick forward after the destruction of the second temple, then after the diaspora, even before, when the Jews were forced into ghettos, 11th, 12th century, wear funny hats and have patches on them to identify them, bang, Kabbalah gets a big boost in Provence and then later in Spain, because people need a way back to the one. So I think for
Right.
me, working with psychology, working with astrology, ultimately, yeah, we have 10 spheres, we have 12 signs, we have two genders, whatever you want. Back, it's basically manifestation of the oneness.
So, Gahl, you're saying that the true path to well-being is through oneness.
I don't think there's any other way, unfortunately, which is the hardest way, but the most satisfying one. Okay, when we die, we go back there for a while, to that oneness. It's not a place, it's an essence. And then we come back again. When people talk about the arrival of the Messiah, it's the same thing. It's
But
when
Gahl,
all of
isn't
us can
our
feel this
whole
oneness.
purpose in life to get to that oneness, even while we're on this planet?
Of course. I think
Not
that
just
that's
wait till
the
we die.
end game. No, because
Yes.
that's the whole end game. It's like a computer game, and even in the tree of life, you have levels. You have to get
Yeah.
to the end game. End game is the crown, and the crown leads you to the one, to Ein Sof, to nothingness, to emptiness. That's precisely what the mystics have been talking
Mm-hmm.
about so long. So that whole concept of I versus you, us versus them, human versus nature is false. It just does. It's not true. It's an illusion. It's a Maya.
So, exactly what you're saying about oneness and interconnectedness, wouldn't this cause like a perspective shift if everyone believed this?
Oh
Wouldn't
my
it
God, that
cause a
would be
shift in the
amazing.
planet and the world and people's relationships and the way the countries function, in our role in the world and our purpose in the world?
No, then there will be no country. Why do you need a country? What for?
Exactly.
Why do you need borders?
You won't need laws. You won't need a country.
No, you won't have disease. That's precisely what we're talking about, is the age of Messiah. It's not like a Messiah will come and touch us and suddenly we're all good again. You saw what happened with Matrix and that. That doesn't work. What does work is all of us getting into that consciousness, that frame of mind. A lot of Kabbalists say that that's the age of the Messiah, when everybody will be enough close to that oneness to get that final push for us to be looking at things and saying that thing is me. Not because I'm egocentric, I'm a narcissistic, and everything is me. It's because everything shares that same oneness.
Oh, wonderful. So that to you is the real connection between
Mhm.
astrology, psychology, and Kabbalah, is the fact that it's all about getting back to the one.
Precisely.
So, Dr. Shipper, I want to ask you about the fact that Kabbalah is often associated with complex symbolism, esoteric concepts. So, how can the average person start incorporating Kabbalistic principles in their everyday life for better well being, for a better quality of life?
Well, first, the Kabbalah is extremely complex, and
Right.
there are no shortcuts, really, unfortunately, and there are no quick fixes when it comes to the Kabbalah. It has to be done in a precise and orderly fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And the advice I would give is first to familiarize yourself with the appropriate texts. So the first thing is to familiarize yourself with the Bible. There are many good texts now, more and more available in other languages other than Hebrew and Aramaic, with which to familiarize yourself with Kabbalistic concepts. And then, most importantly, is to ground your newfound knowledge of Kabbalah in ethics. It is extremely important that one lives a pure ethical life while considering the Kabbalah or practicing the Kabbalah. It is dangerous or certainly disadvantageous to consider the Kabbalah concepts while doing things that are antithetical to the laws of the Torah.
Okay. So in that case, Dr. Shipper, I mean, you're someone who studied the brain, being a neuroscientist, and you've studied Kabbalistic principles as well. So how do you think when one meditates or does mystical practices, which are part of the Kabbalah, how does it affect the brain? What areas of the brain do you think get helped by the spiritual exercise? And have you tested it? Have you researched it?
Research makes experimental research can be applied to the scientific aspects of how the brain functions, but is not relevant to understanding, for example, consciousness as it would be studied through the Kabbalah or Advaita Vedanta or something. These are, in my opinion, they're not material, and therefore they don't lend themselves to experimentation in the classical sense of the word, and which has led to a very unfortunate situation in the last couple of hundred years, where there was a movement so much towards materialism, logical positivism, that it completely ignored subjectivity to the point where some very prominent philosophers think that consciousness is an epiphenomenon or an illusion. But to answer your question more directly, there are aspects of the brain that are activated during meditative and experiences, mystical experiences. So I do see remarkable parallelisms between neuroscience and Kabbalah, except the Kabbalah, we can't prove it in a laboratory.
Thank you for that. Gahl, I want to ask you also about people who are skeptical about spiritual experiences and how it can affect their lives. Can you give us some practical, real-world benefits to studying the Kabbalah?
I think studying anything that makes you think outside of the box and back to that oneness is very, very important. So I don't know how to, I deal with quite a lot of skeptics because I do astrology and it tends to attract more women. They come and then they send their husband, because I'm very pragmatic and practical with my advice, because that's what kind of advice that I want. And then they come, the guys, and usually they sit with
they sit like this,
folded hands. They're going back, entertain me, or I don't know why I'm here. So I'm used to working with these kind of, you mentioned Jacob later on. It's like wrestling with the angel, with these guys. And what I've noticed is that everybody is really open to it. It's just that they have what in Kabbalah they call klipot, or shells, like to get to the orange, you have to peel it off. My grandmother from Turkey used to take these shells, these caskets, you can say, and put it with a lot of sugar and make really good treats from it. So you can always do something with the klipot. They're not always evil. I'm sure you can recycle them or something. But I really think that, first of all, it's fascinating what Dr. Shipper was talking about before, because, the idea that when you meditate or when you experience this oneness and when you do work with the parts of the brain that connects you to the oneness, you don't need so much blood. And for me, it's almost like you're living off another source. Blood is the material way of running the machine. It's like
transactional way of functioning.
Yeah, it's fossil fuel. It's dirty. It's dirty energy. It demands going to the bathroom. It demands eating. It demands destroying the earth. Blah blah blah. When we get to tap into that higher place, da'at, crown, then we don't need that fossil fuel. We can live over solar. We can live over of other sources of energy. It's almost like a proof to tell us that we are, as they say, half human, half divine. That we have that essence, that we have 98% monkey, but 2% divine,
Divinity,
in a sense. So I think that the best way to tell skeptics to do something, or to connect to something, is just to try to do it and see if it works for them. With Kabbalah, of course, it demands quite a lot of energy to get into it. It's not like something, it's like a Shaolin temple. You have to sit outside in the rain for a long time before they even let you in to clean the floor. So intellectually speaking, that's what happens in Kabbalah. It doesn't mean that they're going to lock you out. They're not like that. They're just going to say, yeah, come in, but it's going to take you a few lifetimes to understand what we're talking about. It's okay. I think that always it's really important to try. And for me, any kind of path to Kabbalah, of course, it goes through the traditional ways of learning it, but to prepare yourself to whatever it is you're doing, I really recommend meditation. And even if you meditate 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, that's your connection. And after that, that's your plug. You're getting into the grid. You're getting online. And then after that, you can decide which server you want to go to. Some people go to yoga, some people go to Taoism, some people go to Kabbalah. Now, the thing about Kabbalah, which is really interesting, think about it. Why Kabbalah? I thought about it a lot. From about the 13th, 14th century, something really interesting happens in Europe. A lot of the alchemists of Islam and Christianity are starting to study Kabbalah. They spell it with a Q, they spell it with a C. But why would these people take on the magical system of the underdogs, of the people that we rape and kill and destroy, and they're supposed to be the losers that have no power? What is it about Kabbalah that drew so many people into it, even though it was forbidden by the Inquisition? By the way, the Inquisition didn't do anything to Jews who studied Kabbalah. They did it to Jews that converted, the new Christians, or to Christians who dared to study Kabbalah. That's where the Inquisition went after. And yet people did it, even if the punishment was to have your family burn in front of you. Why? What is it about Kabbalah? Now think about the word abracadabra. Abracadabra, you say in English. Abracadabra is Aramaic. It basically means I shall create that which I said. It's like your enter in the computer. You write an email, nobody got it. You click send. Okay, everybody got it. You can't retrieve it. That's what abracadabra is. Abracadabra is whatever I'm saying, let it now manifest. Because I say a lot of things. I tell you things, God knows. My mother used to say, don't walk here, I'll kill you. She didn't really want to kill me. But if she said, don't walk there, I'm doing a sponge, and I'm cleaning the room, abracadabra, I would probably sleep and die. So what is it about Kabbalah that drew so many people? Because what is magic? Magic is something out of nothing, transformation of life. And that's one of the beautiful things I found in Kabbalah, because Kabbalah tells you, listen, creation came out of that vacuum, out of that ein, out of this nothingness. How can you get into that space of emptiness with your head, which is basically meditation, in order to create what you want? Again, we were talking here about how God sees us as some form of partners, co-creators. Think about the word. The most popular word on the planet is amen. Amen is something all Jews, Christians, and Muslims say at the end of prayer. Already covered like a few billion people. What is amen? Amen, tell me, when I ask people what is amen, and people say, oh, it means faith, or yeah, it has the same root as emunah, faith. But wait, it also means an artist, oman, a creator. Because what is the most powerful profession on the planet? The same profession as God, creation. Yeah. So what Kabbalah tells us is it gives us a way to help God create, to become godlike, what they call in Latin imitatio Dei, imitating God. And that's what we really have to work on, become more and more like God, create, add to the universe, that's why we're here, to participate in the story of creation.
Before the chat, tell us a little bit about how have you married Kabbalah, astrology, and psychology?
Oh no, I haven't married them. They were married way before I was alive. No, I mean, first of all, astrology and Kabbalah are very linked. When I published my book on Kabbalah, the only feedback I got from Simon & Schuster research thing is, where did you come up with the fact that Judaism believes in reincarnation? We can't find it anywhere. And I was so shocked from it that I didn't know even where to look. How do you prove something that, how do you know people breathe? How do you prove that, So astrology and the Zohar is full of astrology. They believe that Abraham was the first astrologer. There is actual information about how people came to see him, stood outside his tent. And in the Zohar, it's full of astrology. And astrology basically is the old psychology. So even Jung, after studied astrology and helping create psychology, said psychology has much more to learn from her older sister than astrology. Because I think that anybody that wanted to be an astrologer, a psychologist before Freud became an astrologer. So they're very, very connected. So unfortunately, I can't take any kind of credit for that.
So do people who practice the Kabbalah, and this is a question for both of you, do they necessarily believe in astrology as well?
I don't think so, but I don't know. Maybe you can answer.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just like magic in general is acknowledged by the Kabbalah to have a reality to it, but it doesn't. But it dissuades the average person to engage it directly. Magic, astrology also is mentioned in Kabbalah. I don't think the people I know who delve in the Kabbalah, I'm not sure how much emphasis they put on the astrological cycles. They may study it, but I'm not sure if it had how much practical significance it has for at least my teachers in Kabbalah.
Dr. Shipper, I want to ask you something. It's something you said earlier. You said there's a whole process and there's a system to studying the Kabbalah. Is that right? So what I want to ask you is there any advice that you can give people if they're just getting interested in it, which will help them with their well-being? Is there any practice of the Kabbalah that you feel will really help people, that everyone should know about?
Well, I think just familiarizing oneself with the main concepts would be a very, very good place to start, either by reading appropriate texts, or there's a lot of online material, people talking about the concepts of the Kabbalah, and becoming more familiar with things like interinclusion, interpenetration, enclothement. These are all concepts that if you first know that they exist, most people don't know that these concepts exist. For example, interinclusion. It's a term that most people won't be able to define, but what it is the idea that every single thing in creation has ensconced within it all of creation. It's a hologram. But the Kabbalists didn't know about holography until Dennis Gabor invented the hologram in the middle of the 20th century. And yet, for thousands of years, they talked about interinclusion, hitkalalut in Hebrew. And in the Eastern meditations, to me, it's no different than Indra's net, where each jewel of the net reflects all the jewels of the universe. It's a concept that you can maybe start to familiarize yourself with, but more importantly is to try to see it in your everyday life. Try to see interinclusion. Try to see that there's a mini Hyman Shipper in every other person I've ever met. And it's more revealed in people who are close to me, like my spouse and my children, comes closer to revelation in the hologram than it is in a stranger. And somebody who I never met, that there is a small Hyman Shipper in there somewhere, but I'm not in contact with it. If you're really motivated to understand the Kabbalah, is to persevere and not to give up, because the universe, according to the Kabbalah, is not neutral. It responds. It talks to you. It's alive. There's life, panpsychism. There's consciousness in absolutely everything.
Everything. Yes. And Gahl, I want to also ask you about your book before we go. Shedding Shadows, The Astrology of 2025. How much did you talk about the Kabbalah in it?
I mean, I think that I see everything in the prism of Kabbalah, so I definitely mention example there. The book is more about the astrology of next year, and the subtitle of it basically is all about how our job is to be able to, next year at least, we have the atmosphere or the ability to peel off things that we don't want. It's almost like we're going to an open soul surgery next year. because of certain things that are happening. Some of the good things, for example, is something we have called the dragon. It's actually mentioned in Sefer Yetzirah. The dragon is moving into Pisces. Pisces, the sign of it's associated, for example, with in the Bible with Joseph and the multicolored coat. It has to do with mysticism and dreams and interpretation of dreams and really diving deep into imagination. So it's a very interesting year, but yeah, we first have to finish this one, which is not over yet.
But Dr. Shipper, before we go, I want to ask you something that you referred to earlier during our conversation. You said that science and the Kabbalah very nicely complement each other and they come together very nicely. Are there times when you found that they're against each other, that what is said in the Kabbalah and what you believe as a neuroscientist are at odds with each other?
Well, as I alluded to already, prior to the 20th century, there are many, many examples where there's a collision between Torah concepts, as elaborated, let's say, in the Talmud, and scientific principles. But that is changing since the advent of quantum physics and relativity. I already mentioned one example where quantum mechanics is very accepting of the idea of ontic paradox, where things can be both a particle and a wave, for example. And the Kabbalah has been discussing paradoxes of this type for millennia. So I'm not saying there's perfect fit. There's always going to be room for further improvement, but I think we're heading in that direction. There's much more conflation between these traditions, scientific and Kabbalistic traditions today than there was 100 years ago. Tremendous more now.
Fascinating. That was so amazing. Sorry, Gahl, you were saying something.
There is a funny story. I don't remember where it is. Maybe you know where it's from, where in Kabbalah they tell us, or in the tradition they tell us, that when you're born as a baby, you know everything there is to know because you just came out of the one, right? But then an angel of God comes to you, and the angel of God has a finger of fire, and it tells you shh, and puts his finger on your mouth, so you don't tell anybody that you know everything. And that's why we have this little palette here. And if you don't have a palette, it means you know everything, and you can go ask that person whatever you want to ask, because the angel skipped him somehow. But that idea is really, and then I thought, well, I can think about another thing. You know, you're not allowed to touch a baby in their right, in the top of their head because it hasn't closed, right? No, that's a physical manifestation of something much bigger. This is their crown in the tree of life. If you put it, you juxtapose it on the body, this is the crown. The baby's crown is open. It's receiving complete information. You can't disturb this highway, this like link, this infrastructure of communication. As they get close, more and more here, almost like after the 3 months that babies sometimes cradle death die, then it closes, then you can touch them here, but they lost some of their connection. And there is a beautiful story that happened to me when I studied astrology in Mexico. And one day one of the ladies came back very distraught. What happened? She just had a baby. She had a baby who was 1 month, 2 months, and then she had a toddler who was 3 years old. She comes back and she says something really eerie happened. What happened? We have this monitor. In the middle of the night, we hear that the 3-year-old toddler gets up, shakes the cradle of the baby, and tell him, "Talk to me of God, of I already forgot. Ya olvidé," he tells him in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
And I got so much goosebumps when I heard this, and I said, this is the proof of God. That's it. Because this 3-year-old cannot lie. In the middle of the night, to wake up, to go to that other kid that has the line still connected, to shake him to wake him up, and to tell him to talk about God because he's a newcomer and I already forgot. I mean, oh my God, I almost cried. And I thought, this is, for me, the biggest revelation of my life, the proof of God. That was for me the proof of God. Not the Cortez, but him.
Amazing. That was such an amazing story. And thank you so much, Gahl, and thank you, Dr. Shipper. I've just enjoyed this episode so much. I've learned a little bit about what you're both thinking, a little bit about the Kabbalah, and it's just fascinating.
Thank you so much for this
opportunity.
You. It was a wonderful experience for me.
I mean, thanks a lot for putting us together. and creating this triangle of knowledge.
To my listeners, I hope this conversation has sparked your interest in the Kabbalah, in learning more about it, and in finding peace, balance, and well-being in your life. Thank you for being here with us today. Can I please request you to go and subscribe to Wellness Curated on the podcasts and Wellness Curated by Anshu Bahanda on YouTube. We would like to get you more and more episodes for free, and we request you to just subscribe to our channels. Thank you so much. See you next time.
You first check what your situation is. What are your needs? And based on that, you can pick one of the 64 chapters or verses or sections. So it's like you can use this as a coach when you help people, or you can use it to coach yourself.
In I Ching, if you understand the 8 trigrams, enough already, because these 8 trigrams will evolve to 64 hexagram.